My name is Victor Monroe. I'm 68 years old, and I'm only just now understanding how much of my life I spent mistaking endurance for something noble. I'm not sick in any dramatic way. I can still walk. I can still drive. My hands shake a little in the mornings, but they steady. What's wrong with me isn't urgent enough for anyone to panic. That's part of the problem. Nothing about my life ever set off alarms. It just thinned out over time. Quietly. Until one day, I noticed how little was left. I live alone now. Not in a tragic way. Just in the way people do when everyone else slowly pairs off, drifts away, or dies. The house is too big for me, but not big enough to feel like a chapter worth closing. So I stay. I sit at the same kitchen table I've had since my 40s, the one with the nicked edge where my son once dragged a chair too hard. I still haven't sanded it down. I don't know why. Maybe it feels like proof that something happened here. I'm telling this because I don't have much time left, to be honest. Not because death is knocking loudly, but because it's standing close enough now that I can hear it breathe. When you're young, time feels like a wide field. When you're my age, it feels more like a hallway. You can still move, but you know where it ends. For most of my life, I believed that staying put, pushing through, and not complaining were signs of character. My father believed that. His father before him, too. Endurance was the currency of respect in our house. You didn't leave. You didn't quit. You didn't ask for more than what you'd already been given. You put your head down and bore it. And for a long time, that worked. Or at least, it looked like it did. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew what everyone else did for a living. Men were defined by their jobs. Women were defined by how well they kept things together. Nobody talked about happiness. That wasn't a goal. Stability was the goal. Predictability. Being someone others could count on, even if it meant you couldn't count on yourself. I was good at enduring. Even as a boy. If something hurt, I stayed quiet. If something bored me, I pushed through. If something felt wrong, I assumed it was supposed to. I learned early that discomfort wasn't a signal. It was a test. When I was 22, I took a job at a manufacturing plant about 40 minutes from where I grew up. It wasn't what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew it wasn't that. Still, it paid steadily. It had benefits. My father nodded when I told him. That nod meant more to me than I understood at the time. I told myself it was temporary. Most things I regret started out as temporary. I got married at 26. Her name was Elaine. She laughed easily back then. She used her hands when she talked. She wanted to move somewhere warmer. Somewhere with water nearby. I remember her saying that more than once, usually while folding laundry or washing dishes. I'd nod and say, maybe someday. I meant it. I really did. I just assumed someday was waiting patiently for us, like a room we could walk into whenever we were ready. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I worked more hours after they were born. That seemed like the responsible thing to do. Overtime meant braces were paid for, college funds started, and a better car. I told myself I was showing up in the way that mattered. I missed things. Not all of it. Just enough to matter. I missed a school play because a shipment came in late. I missed a birthday dinner because a machine broke down. I missed a lot of ordinary evenings because I was too tired to be present. I'd sit on the couch, half listening, half asleep, thinking that rest was something I'd earn later. Elaine stopped asking me to come to certain things. Not out of spite. Out of efficiency. It was easier to plan without me than to be disappointed again. At the time, I thought that meant she understood. What it really meant was that she was adapting. Years went by like that. Smooth on the surface. No major disasters. We paid our bills. The kids stayed out of serious trouble. From the outside, it probably looked like a life done right. Inside, things were wearing thin. I didn't notice at first. You don't feel erosion while it's happening. You just feel tired. A little distant. Like you're always catching up to yourself. There were moments. Small ones. Elaine is sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. My son is not telling me about a problem at school until weeks later. My daughter was learning to drive mostly with her mother because I was busy. None of it felt like a breaking point. It felt like the weather. Something you live under, not something you confront. I told myself this was adulthood. That this was what commitment looked like. You endure the dull parts, so the important parts stay intact. But the truth is, I didn't know how to tell the difference anymore. In my 40s, the plant started downsizing. I survived the first few rounds. That felt like validation. Proof that staying loyal paid off. When they offered early retirement packages, I turned them down. I wasn't ready, I said. What I meant was I didn't know who I'd be without that job. Elaine wanted me to consider it. She'd started talking again about moving. About starting something new while we still can. I remember feeling irritated by that. As if she were asking me to abandon something sacred. We argued more than quiet arguments. Tired ones. Nothing explosive. Just conversations that ended without resolution. We both thought the other would come around eventually. She left when I was 51. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. She told me she was unhappy. That she'd been unhappy for a long time. That she didn't blame me, exactly. That might have hurt less if she had. She moved to a smaller place across town at first. Then, 2 years later, she moved south, near the water. I helped her load the car. We hugged. It felt polite, like a funeral where everyone is being careful not to cry too hard. I went back to work the next day. That's what endurance had taught me. You keep going. You don't stop just because something hurts. I thought the pain would dull with time. In some ways, it did. But something else happened instead. A kind of narrowing. My world got smaller, not because I wanted it to, but because I never practiced expanding it. The kids grew up. They moved away. We talk. Not as often as I'd like, but often enough to say we do. They're good people. They have their own lives. I don't blame them for not orbiting around mine. I retired at 62. The plant gave me a plaque, a handshake, a sheet cake in the break room. People said nice things. They meant them. I took the plaque home and put it in a closet. Retirement was quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just quiet. The days stretched. The habits I'd built around work didn't translate into anything else. I woke up early with nowhere to go. I ate meals standing up because sitting down alone felt heavier. I started thinking more. That's when endurance stopped feeling like a virtue and started feeling like a delay. I realized how often I'd stayed in situations not because they were right, but because leaving felt irresponsible. How often I'd ignored discomfort because I thought it was the price of being dependable. How many times have I told myself, this is just how it is, instead of asking, is this what I want? The turning point wasn't sudden. It was a phone call. Elaine had gotten sick. Not terminal, but serious enough. She'd had a stroke. Mild, they said. But she wasn't the same afterward. Her speech was slower. Her hands didn't move the way they used to. I flew down to see her. We sat by the water she'd always talked about. The air was warm. She looked older. So did I. We talked about the kids, about the weather, about small things. Then she said something I still hear at night. She said, I thought we'd have more time. Not accusatory. Just tired. I wanted to tell her I thought so too. That I'd been waiting for the right moment. I thought endurance would earn us something at the end. But there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. She died 2 years later. I went to the funeral. I stood with people who knew her better in her last years than I had. I was grateful she'd been loved. I was devastated that it hadn't been me. That's when the clarity came. Not like a revelation. More like a settling. a heavy understanding that didn't ask permission. Endurance hadn't saved anything. It had just postponed my noticing what I was losing. There are things you can't fix once you see them clearly. You can't go back and sit through the play. You can't have the conversation before it turns into silence. You can't choose differently once the choice is gone. I have memories. They're nothing. But they're not enough to fill the spaces where a life could have unfolded differently. I don't say this to condemn endurance entirely. There are moments when staying matters. When pushing through is the only honest option. But I wish I'd known the difference between commitment and avoidance. Between patience and fear. I wish I'd known that being reliable to everyone else doesn't mean much if you're absent from your own life. If you're listening to this and you're younger than I am, I won't tell you what to do. I don't have the authority for that. I can only tell you what I learned too late. If something feels wrong for a long time, it probably is. If you're always waiting for the right moment, you may be waiting for permission that never comes. And if you believe that enduring will eventually turn into reward, ask yourself what that reward is supposed to look like. I thought there would be a moment when it all made sense. When the sacrifice revealed its purpose. What I found instead was a quiet room and a lot of unanswered questions. I'm not bitter. That surprises people when I say it. I'm sad, yes. And tired. But mostly, I'm clear. The time I have left is shorter now. I don't plan it much. I don't rush. I sit by the windows. I take walks. I let myself feel things without immediately justifying them. If this meant something to you, I hope it stays with you in a gentle way. Not as a warning. Just as a presence. I'll be here a little while longer. Long enough to notice the light in the afternoon. Long enough to remember what mattered. That will have to be enough.